Hey, I'm Gavin. Welcome to the channel. If you're new to the channel, I'm documenting my adventure as I set out to build a hybrid card game that's pretty adventurous. Today, I'll be talking about what inspired me and through the design process as well. I'll be introducing my first card type, the pawn card. Now, I got carried away explaining all this, and so without further delay, let's jump on in.
So my inspiration, like I said, I've played card games since I can remember. First taste of it was Pokemon. That was, maybe just collecting. I went to a tournament when I was a kid. I didn't even know how to play when I joined the tournament. I got defeated by everyone I played. You earned badges, and I think they just gave me like a little badge just because they felt bad that I didn't win one game. Um, it was it was like zany brainies. If you know, you know. Then Yu-Gi-Oh! This is the big one. This is that guy. I was one of those guys, but I didn't go to so many tournaments. I just hung out with a lot of people who did go to tournaments, and the friends that I hung out with were really good at tournaments. Like when Light Sworns were going, my friend would top at tournaments. So I just knew that I was playing competitively because I was playing against my friends who were really competitive. I went to some tournaments, but me personally, I always built decks to try to get, be really weird and try things out that other people weren't trying out. I didn't want to play what everyone else was playing. I wanted to find some cards that were hidden in there and try to build a deck around that. So that was kind of my Yu-Gi-Oh experience, but I've played so long with Yu-Gi-Oh. From Yu-Gi-Oh, we transferred over to Vanguard, me and those close friends. We went to Vanguard. Vanguard was really nice. It was a nice fresh start. It was a new card game at that time. We learned it and we just really took to it. It was something where it didn't have the same kind of meta feel that was kind of pushing down on Yu-Gi-Oh at that time. Yu-Gi-Oh was kind of just felt like you had to spend $500 to have a deck that was worthwhile at the tournament. But in Vanguard, everything was so new that the meta fluctuated where there wasn't really much of a meta. It was more so like anybody could be creative and build a good deck as long as you know how to play it well. So it felt more like a Swiss Army knife where decks could just kind of come in and kind of play. Uh, and then as of recently, the last couple of years, I always knew about Magic. I mean, who doesn't? But I never gravitated to actually playing it. And it wasn't until me and a couple of friends we went to the card store to play, I think it was Munchkins, and one of the guys, kind of tried to sell us on Magic, and we kind of just wrote it off, but we laughed about it. And then eventually we kept going back to play Munchkins, and we're like, oh, let's just give it a shot. So we bought Magic decks, and we've been playing since. We've been playing for a bit. Commanders are, format we play. We play casually. We call it just Wizard Poker, and we just have a good time. So it's all just laughs, and nobody's taking it. And crucially, I take it seriously. What are we talking about? But we have a good time with it. It's fun. Um, from there, so was surrounded by card art. I loved it. Like looking at card art from Pokemon as a young kid. I remember going over to a friend's house and he was opening up a pack and he pulled the Venusaur. I was so jealous because like the one few times my parents actually bought me Pokemon packs, I never pulled a holo. So watching my friend pull the Venusaur, I know one of my friends had, a Blastoise, but I mean we all knew some kid who had a Charizard. It's just that they must have gotten lost. I think my brother had a Munchamp. So it was just seeing all these cards, as a kid growing up, seeing all their different stats. I didn't know what all these meant, but it's really cool to see that. I pinned these two to kind of see like, how much, a variant of English to Japanese makes a difference and how much stands out from just the Pokemon cards. Obviously if you never played, you can kind of put together that you're gonna need some type of like stage before this somehow. I don't know how Pokemon plays still, but there's certain things that just from the card language you can kind of pick up. This must mean something, or it's HP. Anybody who's played a game knows that means life points or health points. So, and then another key factor is that weakness section. But moving forward, Yu-Gi-Oh! This is like, such a deep dive of like where card game really just hit home to me. I remember as a kid going to the card stores with guys that were like so much older than me. We were just getting picked up by mom and dad, and we'd just go hang out there. We'd hang out with all like the older guys playing Yu-Gi-Oh! That was back when like Yatagarasu was in. Like I think it was like 5 packs deep into like the series. I remember I got this card and I thought it was like this cool card. Found out it was just a sticker. You know, one of those, like, you put a couple quarters in like a machine, and then, you know, it has like a bunch of prints, and then it pulls out, and you get this little, like, in between cardboard, you get a card, and then someone must have traded it to me, and I thought it was a real card, and it was just a sticker. Good times. But yeah, I mean, from all this, from Yu-Gi-Oh, playing Yu-Gi-Oh competitively, Yu-Gi-Oh's always kind of gravitated. This card by far is just a beautiful card. I think it's just always kind of drew me in. You know, you have the classic Blue Eyes, but this one just, that's why I put it on here. It's just this beautiful card. I think there's just so much going on in it where I've always drawn back to this card. I don't think anyone has as much of a fascination as I do with this card. I don't know why I think this card is as beautiful as it is, but I do. I remember playing, you know, Cyber Dragons. I had a friend who played Cyber Dragons really well, and then, you know, I played these Insectors. They were fun, real fun, kind of fast deck. It was like one of the competitive decks I did play. You know, I always try to stay away, like I said, but, you know, eventually I'd go back in, play some, you know, competitive decks just so I could go into the tournament and, you know, try, you know, throw my hat in the ring. But Yu-Gi-Oh has this thing where a lot of times the meta will take over, and even if you go to the deck with a pretty competitive deck, you'll just get stomped by things that are just, in better lack of better words, they're just broken. Like, people have found a way to make the mechanic overly intense, and so that's a lot of the, like, the Dino Rabbit decks were out, where you use dinosaurs with this rabbit right here to bring them out. Then you could synchro a lot. That's around the time we started shifting over to Vanguard. After, well, a little bit after. And then once this became kind of like a redundant thing at the tournament, you know, I had a friend who played the Shooting Star, and he was amazing with it. Like, that was by far the hardest deck to play against. I spent so much time trying to incubate a deck into beating this deck. It was just phenomenal. He was just so good at it. He'd pull wins out like he was like all the way down, and then he would win. Fun times, great times. You guys, this thing though, it just, you know, you had the synchros that came out, so people who stopped playing and came back, the synchro would kind of lose you. Like, what the fuck is that? Then you have Exceeds. Those are like all black cards. Another mechanic. And then now you have these guys, these links. I don't even know if that's exactly what they're called, but they're also just another mechanic. And it's kind of like it concreted how to play the game, but then they implemented new things. So it just became like, for anybody who was trying to keep up with Yu-Gi-Oh, you know, you had to keep up with this to play in the tournaments. You had to buy the new thing, then the new thing. And that was kind of a lot. On top of that, if you stopped playing, let's say you stopped at around Cyber Dragon's time, you know, Lightsworn, you stopped and you want to go back, you'd go back and you'd have synchros, and you just have so many different options. It'd almost be overwhelming, unless you just were one of the people who just bought what was ever in meta and just jumped into the meta. It's just boring. So I really was inspired by playing these games, but it's also trying to find a way to break this cycle where they're just kind of creating new things because they've exacerbated old mechanics to where it's just not even a fun game anymore. It's just, you know, what's going to win. Shift over to Cardfight Vanguard. This is where, you know, it started to feel a little different. Some things were new. Yes, the JTCG, so it did kind of still have that money mechanic where, hey, if we have this mechanic working, we can, you know, make a new mechanic that's stronger, and then people buy that one, and then we have a new mechanic here then that'll be better than this one, and each mechanic's just a little bit stronger, so then each time you're just spending more money and more money. That's how most Japanese trading card games are, unfortunately. This one did kind of break that cycle a little bit because there was just so many different factions. These guys right here, these factions like Shadow Paladins, Oracle Think Tank, Royal Paladins, they had these different factions at the bottoms, and within those factions there was different ways to play the game, and I don't think everyone was as adventurous as like me and my friends, because we tried out a bunch of them and we had a fun time with it. There was just so much different variety, and because they all play differently, we could go to the tournament with a deck that nobody was playing, like the well, everyone was playing Shadow Paladins, but you go to the deck with like a Spike Brothers deck, and because it's so different than the other ones, you'd be able to smash people because they don't know how to play against it. That was kind of fun because then there wasn't much of a meta at that time. It was just kind of, at that time, it was just everyone could kind of go free for all and build a deck, and, you know, as long as you knew how to play your deck well, you felt like you had a chance to, win the tournament. It was a fun game, had a lot of good things going for it. Past that, you have so many different games. Like I said, Magic. I played, recently. I still play Magic with some friends, but we played Magic. Duel Masters was fun, but it was just a blimp. It was like he was here, it was gone. I remember one guy. I remember we were at the card store, playing Yu-Gi-Oh, and we saw him come in and sell all of his Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and he just bought a bunch of Duel Master stuff. So he was like, screw Yu-Gi-Oh, and he sold all his Yu-Gi-Oh stuff. He had a lot of good stuff too, and then he sold it just for his Duel Master stuff. And then Duel Masters like just flopped. It just didn't hit as hard. It felt like it was doing the exact same thing Yu-Gi-Oh was doing. It just felt like almost like a mirror copy. It was different for sure, but that's just kind of the vibe it gave off. So I remember seeing that kid come back again another night. We were all at the tournament, and he just was buying more Yu-Gi-Oh stuff. So clearly he, I hope he didn't regret it, but he definitely went back to Yu-Gi-Oh. Digimon, this card art we can learn a lot from, but it was inspiring because it's like, why is this not as appealing as like this? Why is these two kind of seem like they have inherently the same problem? This is Buddy Fight, made by the same people who made Vanguard, Bushiroad. But why do they seem like they have the same issues? Well, I'll tell you, because they look like they're just messy. They have a lot going on. And that's kind of an issue for new players, especially if you want to grow, and make something feel, cozy and, almost natural. You don't want this much. I mean, like I started seeing this as kind of like a same thing, but past that, it just feels like there's a lot going on in this card. So from this, we had all these different card games going on that, I really enjoyed playing. And yeah, of course, like I'm going to play card games, so I'm going to want to build a card game that's great or, can measure up to these guys. But also, what about these card games really inspired me? Well, I'll tell you that like I didn't watch the anime a lot, but I knew all about them because I had friends that were just, they were engulfed with the anime. They loved telling me all about it, and I loved living it through them. That's kind of how I learned about Dragon Ball Z. I didn't really sit down and watch Dragon Ball Z all the way through. I'll admit it, I'm man enough. But when it comes down to it, I learned so much from just hearing them talk about it. And it was the same thing with Yu-Gi-Oh. Like if you watch the 5GX series in Japan, it's vastly different than the one they put in English. I remember my friend telling me that the main character goes around and just starts killing his friends because he's possessed. And that's like super dark. And like it was like Yu-Gi-Oh was put on like KBS Kids and stuff like that. So they were like trying to figure a way to, censor it and make a way to make it so that they could still bring it over to American audiences because Yu-Gi-Oh is doing well. It's just like thinking about that. Yu-Gi-Oh had this like dark premise, and in Japan, Yu-Gi-Oh consistently did have kind of like this dark undertone that was, really drew me, and I really respected it because it was trying to do something different. And the story was trying to do something much more rich, but it just didn't translate well for American, companies, because consumers would have loved it, but companies were like, no, we can't have our kids consuming stuff like that, which is sad because we're eventually going to if we want to. So Yu-Gi-Oh, bam. Yu-Gi-Oh is still a card game in the TV show. Seeing it there, in this like the first episode, Joey's smashing Yugi, and he's just like, yeah, we're just playing the game, and it's just a card game on the mat, and it's like, okay, it's a physical game. Then Kaiba, this guy, Blue Eyes man, his family, his company, or he is involved with a company that ends up making the dual discs. And what those dual discs do is they allow to project a monster that almost feels like it's pulling the monster from another reality. It doesn't feel like they're like projecting it into augmented reality. The way the characters interact with the monsters, it almost feels like they're scared of the monsters because the monsters exist now. It's not like they just think, oh, it's just like our AR. It's like this monster's here and it's ready to go. And each character controls that monster when they're dealing with it. And so that aspect was so rich. And I remember as a kid going, if we could play our cards and these giant blue eyes dragons would come out of the card, it was like our imagination would go wild and we would just be, we'd love it. Well, fast forward to today, people are trying to do that. They're trying to, so they're trying to make the blue eyes come out of the cards. We got Chaos Dark Magician Chaos Dark Magician. Magician, no, Magician Black Chaos. No, it's Chaos Black Magician. Weird. So you have these guys above the card. People have been working on this. I don't know the names of the exact companies that are working on this. I apologize, but people are trying to work on creating a Yu-Gi-Oh! AR game, which is more props to them. It's beautiful, good work doing so. You guys, like, I've seen some of the progress. They're doing it. They're even getting the synchros. So they're trying the library, the database of cards. The issue is you're going to have so much that is being left behind because of how big and vast the card game, really is. Because you have the originals, these are from like the 5th set, 6th set. Then you have cards that are from like the 20th set. And then you have cards from, I'm guessing on these numbers, but like the 60th set or something like that, something crazy. And there's just so many different cards that are left behind that, like me, if I wanted to build a deck over the Ojamas, which were like these like one-eyed, buff, like Ginyu Force-ish kind of guys that would always strike poses in their cards. And they were just kind of like dorky characters, but they were just fun, Like I always had fun kind of just like playing with them because no one expected them to hit hard. And then when they could, with the few cases they could, then everyone's like, what the heck just happened? But would those get transferred in? Because there's such a vast library, it just feels like there's a lot that's going to need to get done. And it feels like Yu-Gi-Oh! Wasn't designed to be put into augmented reality by the way the card game inherently works. There's just so much like leeway. The way the trap cards work, that's just going to be a whole different other animation that's going to be needed. The animations, that are going to be needed for the trap cards, the spell cards, are just going to be like to make them worthwhile and make the player feel like they're part of the game. Like if you use like magical cylinders, against somebody, to see cylinders pop up and shoot back their blast, like, yeah, I just don't think that would happen. Like it's just so much work. So that was like the first phase that kind of started clicking and going, well, what would a game look like to do this, to live in this augmented reality and play like it? But it's still a fun game when you sit down, OG style, and you sit down with physical cards, outside of the augmented reality. What can live in both these worlds, and have, a good, concrete lore base, but it's not, feeling like it's leaving, this behind, this augmented reality madness that arguably is on the precipice. Before we get into that, another big inspiration, chess. Chess is just this timeless game because you need something that's going to be, I think chess is, I'll get into why these two relate, so just bear with me. But chess is this game where everything's concrete. Everything is in front of you that you need. You could set up tables with just chessboards on it. Everyone's got what they need. You go sit down, doesn't matter what you need. You don't need to bring anything. Everything's right there. And you just go play. And then you have such a time that chess has been out and engaged with this audience that if you know how to play chess once, you can go back there, these two people, like he could have been like 50 years ago, maybe, I don't know his age, maybe 6 years ago, he could have been this kid playing with an older guy too. And it's just like, chess is that timeless game where you can come back and play it over again. And you don't need to bring new things to it. You don't need to be worried about, are there going to be new cards that are going to be taking over chess, like that I'm not going to be able to play, or I'm not going to understand. And so I'm just going to have to trust my opponent to doing the right thing. Is that going to happen in this? Well, with chess, you don't have to worry about that. And so that's a huge like clicking moment, was like, oh, like chess has a limited pool, so it allows you to just always bring in the same game you want, but it's still interesting. It's so rich with how it's played. But then the collectability of the trading card game of it is just completely out of the table. So you have to find a way to meet in the middle somewhere. So somehow find a way to meet in the middle. Where we see chess grow is where, we have games that are, older games, but they've already animated chess completely because they have that limited pool. You have characters walking up in the cycle and beating up another piece, and then they take in the place of it like they would in chess, but now it's animated, and it's all animated, and it's all doable, and it's all, you don't have to worry about taxing the system too much because there's just so much of a database. So chess allowed that to open up, which is beautiful. Now, Harry Potter just showed how chess could be done in multiple different ways. You know, you have the one where they're, you know, on the Christmas scene where Harry and Ron are playing. I don't know if it's Christmas exactly. That movie's kind of blending together, but they're sitting there playing Harry Potter. They're playing Wizard's chess, and it's freaking sweet. They're enjoying it. And you see like one of the pieces just smack the other piece and destroy it. And it's just like that would be a cool game to witness and be in there. And like with virtual reality or augmented reality, that would be fun. What would be even better is when Hermione, Ron, and Harry all walk across on this huge chess board, and then the pieces are like, "No, you're not going anywhere," so they have to battle to get out. And then it's just this like, you know, these statues, but then they come to life in one single moment and fight, and then you just have this epic battle at the end. And you know, Ron, you know, takes one for the team. Those are the type of things that I kind of want to integrate. It's something where, you know, it's not as rich as, you know, a 3D monster, you know, above, you know, running around attacking things aggressively, but you have something alive right here. Something's alive. So where can I meet in the middle? You know, I want to again meet in the middle here. So to do that, I decided, you know, you need a limited pool. You need like, you know, the way I built it is you have a chessboard, right? I think it's 5x5. You have their chessboard, and then you're gonna have two players sitting on both ends. And then you have their decks standing on these pillars, is what I kind of like imagine them as. These decks would be on these pillars, kind of shifting. Like I talked about in my last video, the deck rests on here, and then once you shift your opponent's deck all the way over this end spot, that's when they lose the game. So let's say their deck's right up here, and it's resting up here, and then you'd have your decks up here on your pillars. And you know, they're pillars, it's a wall. It's undecided. That's almost kind of like a semantic at this point. It's just fundamentally that I think this looks cool. You know, you're playing it with your friends. You're playing it on like a virtual reality table, and then you have, you know, your opponent standing right here with their cards at their hands, and then you have, you know, you have your armory right here, and then you have your deck up here, and then you're playing cards on here. So you're playing your card, and your card comes alive with a character on it, depending on what character. For the pawns, which would be the cards you put on here, your pawns are going to be from 1 to 7. So you're going to have different 1 to 7 variations to pick from to build a deck out of. I wanted to limit it, but I wanted to keep it open. And you know, and I'll explain this a little bit more. We have 7 variations on there, but these pawns are, you know, essentially just going to move across to try to get to your opponent's side to damage them. But you can use your armory to, you know, summon like a sword or something that gives all soldiers a big boost. And then maybe the character, you know, your opponent standing right up there, because they use that sword shows up in virtual reality or augmented reality on their back, and they're kind of now wearing it. Or if they use like a helmet, they would be wearing the helmet from what you can see. You know, so your opponent almost starts wearing the armor that they're using from their armory. That's giving buffs to your pawns on the table. So what is a pawn? So your pawns, this is a really rough card art, and this art is just placeholders. It is not by any means like final rough or anything like that. Initially, it's just, you know, to represent what the card means, not so much, you know, the actual art. That's the fun part about this game, is that, you know, the number 2 is going to be connected to a soldier. 4 is be connected to knights. 7 is going to be connected to the dragon. So you're going to have those connections, but the art that's on this card really is flexible, because then you could have, you know, different artist renditions. But when you go back to this, you know, this table right here where everyone's playing, you're going to have that same soldier kind of pop up. That's just going to be like the baseline one. And with AI and AI helping and stuff like that, then eventually we can get into, you know, making 3D models of, you know, limited edition prints and stuff like that of the sets with varying arts, you know, as 3D models in the game too. But so you have your pawn card, and then you have your factions, your instrument factions. So you have your sword, your shield, and then your arrow. And it just kind of works like rock, paper, scissors. Your arrow will beat your shield. Your shield will beat your sword. And your sword will beat your arrow. Kind of like basic, kind of like rock, paper, scissors element. But, if you were up close to somebody with a sword, you could definitely, and they had an arrow, they're not going to stand a chance because you can attack them quick enough before that. Your shield is going to be able to block their sword, and then your arrow can get through their shield defense. So it's kind of just that, instrument, rock, paper, scissors. And then this bottom part right here is kind of your weak spot. So if someone attacks you from behind, you're going to be taking damage, but your power isn't 7 anymore, like this dragon here. Your power is going to be 3.5, so it's always going to be half. So if you attack from behind, it's going to be 1. Attack from behind, 2. Similar to kind of how the Pokemon game has these weak spots, right here, like I was pointing out a little bit ago. The weaknesses, it's a resistance, but yeah, so your weaknesses, similar thing, but I wanted to make it kind of more just kind of straightforward and kind of like, kind of built in there. And I also really wanted to stay away from putting language on the cards. I wanted this to be able to be printable in multiple different languages, where the only thing I have to change in the whole set is the rulebook, to different languages. That way anybody could come pick up a set and they don't have to, have an English set or a Japanese set or a Korean set or a Chinese set. Like everyone understands it. Like once you see this card, you understand the symbols and everything's good to go. Like, let's move forward. We know how to play the game. We know how to build our decks from what we have because we've internalized it for sure. So that is the kind of mechanic that I started trying to internalize with this game. And I wanted it to be pretty straightforward and simple. So like chess, everyone could just kind of pick up a game and start playing. So as you can see, this is just one card. I have three different cards. You have the pawn, you have the keys, and then you have spells. Each one kind of has their own reason of why they are the way they are, and kind of constructs the deck. You construct the deck around those and how you want to play them. So there's definitely explaining I can do for all three, and I'll make a video for it. I just want to introduce the pawn card as kind of like how it connects back to playing chess. And how it connects to, playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And how how my inspiration for Yu-Gi-Oh! In those virtual reality battles, and then, how this started connecting the dots to how could you make the virtual reality feasible, where it's not over, demanding on a system, especially from someone who's a startup, because these people are working their ass off and trying to create this game. I just feel like they're against an unwinnable battle with such a huge demanding library that just keeps evolving. So I knew that there needed to be a better way. If I created it, I'm not sure. I'm working at it. I'm going to definitely put in all my energy I can to keep shooting forward.
So that about sums up the meat and potatoes of my inspiration. Obviously, there are some pieces that were pulled from all over the place, some not even game related. Now, if there are any details that I talked about in this video that you're curious about and you'd like to know more, leave a comment below. If you made it through this whole video, you're a real one. So thanks for tuning in. I'm Gavin, and I'll catch you in the next one. But until then, peace.